Okay, welcome to Unit 1, Lesson 2 for Dual Credit Government. This lesson is titled, What Ideas About Civic Life Informed the Founding Generation? So there's a lot of ancient philosophy and studies of government and things like that. This was a slide we ended up on in class, and we really didn't get to talk about some of these basic philosophical questions that you need to ask your government. So the first one is, what should be the purpose of government? So remember, philosophers basically ask what, how, why, things like that. So what should be the purpose of a government? Should it be to provide a common defense? Should it be to provide for the common good? Establish justice? Those are the things that our founders thought the purpose of government should be, but that's debatable. Some people might argue that the purpose of government should be to provide shelter, to provide food and substance for its citizens, depending on where you're at in the world. Some people think the only purpose of government should be for protecting your property and your liberties, and the government really shouldn't have anything else to do with your life. The second question, where should people in positions of power get their authority to govern? Almost unanimously across the world, people agree that it should be derived from the people, the concept of popular sovereignty that we've talked about quite a bit. How should government be organized? Going back to what we talked about in the last lesson about three branches of government where you have judicial, executive, and legislative branches working together to try and pass laws, interpret laws, and execute laws. What kinds of government should be respected and supported, and on the flip side of that, what kinds of governments should be resisted and fought? So you have to think, you might have a kingdom where you have a king that really has a great grasp on how to rule his community, and people really thrive in it, and he lets people have their individual freedoms and practice their own religions, but that's kind of rare. You normally see kingdoms end up in some sort of tyranny where they take more power than what they really should take. Those kind of things maybe should be resisted and fought. But then also you have democracies where people vote in their officials, and they have very corrupt governments. The same people get elected over and over. They rig elections, and then they funnel money out of public funds through tax dollars and take it for themselves, for their own personal wealth. You have some societies where people are permitted to hold other offices outside of their political office, so they may be elected as a senator or even all the way up as a president or some sort of prime minister, and they're also a lawyer or a doctor that's getting paid millions of dollars on the side as well. So you have all those conflicts of interest. You have to figure out what should be respected and supported and what should be fought and resisted. Okay, on to the next slide. We're going to talk about these guys a lot over the course of the semester. The guy on the bottom left is John Locke, bottom right, Thomas Hobbes. These are our two main natural rights philosophers that we're going to talk about. Thomas Hobbes kind of came along first, and this was the lesson where we did the 1 minute in a state of nature, where I may or may not have taken a lot of cell phones and laptops during that time period and stood on a chair and yelled, "This is the kingdom of my classroom!" But anyways, Thomas Hobbes argued basically that that was a state of nature, where everyone feared death. Therefore, a strong man would come to rule society, and everyone would just kind of give in to this strong man for the sake of survival. You would give in to the physically strongest and most intimidating person, because if you didn't give in to them, you'd be in deep trouble because they would just kill you. So you'd let them rule over you, and that was really Thomas Hobbes' argument of why people came together in society, so that a strong man could rule over them and try and keep them safe. John Locke was a little more positive. He argued that in a state of nature, people are all free and equal and rational human beings, and these people would subject themselves to a government through a social contract, an agreement between the people and the government, where the people would give up certain rights to the government, such as their ability to protect themselves and things like that. So the government will protect their life, liberty, and property. John Locke is more of the optimist in this natural rights philosophy, but they both are arguing the same point. What are human beings like in a state of nature, and how does government arise out of this state of nature? Thomas Hobbes argues it's out of chaos. It's out of people killing each other and only wanting protection for their life. And that's why they submit themselves to a strong government. Whereas John Locke argues people are rational. People are good people to the core. In general, people are free and equal. Now, if they decide to enter into a society and subject themselves to a government, it is for their own self-preservation of these rights of life, liberty, and property, not to be ruled over, only to survive. Okay? So we'll keep talking back about these two guys. They're both natural rights philosophers. Now, what values from natural rights philosophy influenced our founding generation? Okay? Some of the basic principles that influence them. First of all, individual rights. The idea that each person has inalienable rights, regardless of wealth, regardless of social status, regardless of birth. There is no nobility in America. And our founders wrote that into the Constitution both as a denied power to our central government, saying that you cannot grant titles of nobility, but also a denied power to the states, saying that states could not form a noble class. We really wanted people to have that social mobility because individual rights were very important from our founding generation, and we believe that that was a natural rights idea. This idea of popular sovereignty that I talked about in the last slide, that government is there by the consent of the people. The government only rules because the people allow them to rule. This also includes that idea of the right to revolution that Thomas Jefferson is so fond of. He uses this as the idea that we need to find a new government that suits our needs best if the current government is not suiting our needs. And if I were in class, I would ask you guys, is it time for America to have a revolution, to overthrow our current constitutional system and establish something new? Has our government become destructive of our ends and are they not looking out for our best interest anymore? Are they even ruling with the consent of us anymore? So, all of these things that we talk about in modern society, and there are political philosophers out there and political scientists out there that argue we need another constitutional convention. We need to scrap the current constitution and start over again, okay? Because this just doesn't relate to modern times very well. Back in the 1780s, they weren't thinking about, whether your cell phone was going to be a private idea or not. So popular sovereignty is a big aspect that our founding generation picked up, but it's difficult to translate the Constitution into today. Number 3, limited government. By focusing on individuals and kind of John Locke's social contract theory, the government is limited in what it is capable of doing. In America, our government has enumerated powers, those listed powers in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, that they should not be able to exceed. It says that these are the powers that you're allowed to do. Now, there's the elastic clause, there's the commerce clause. The commerce clause says that the government can regulate any goods transported among the several states and Indian tribes and other nations, basically meaning if anything's ever produced and has the opportunity of maybe getting shipped out of a state, the government has the right to regulate it. So that grants a huge amount of power to our government. And the elastic clause states that the government may pass laws that are necessary and proper to carry out the above enumerated powers. So essentially saying they're allowed to create laws that are necessary and proper. As long as they can argue that a law is necessary and proper, they can pass it. So our founding fathers had the full intention of having a limited government, but sometimes people interpret that to say we can do whatever we want. Number 4 is human equality, okay? Human equality, all men are created equal. We state it in our Declaration of Independence, and we've talked about this quite a bit in class. Human equality at this time is very different than what we think of it today because, it's more like you're equal if you are a white landowning male, but nevertheless, the idea of human equality and social mobility was important, and not having a nobility or a permanent upper class was important to our founding fathers. People should be based on the content of their character, and their actions, not just because their father did something important or their mother did something important or they own a great deal of land. That shouldn't be enough to boost you into a higher role in society. It should be based off of your merits as a person. Okay? So we've looked at this before, the idea of limited government and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I also have this little thing here talking about natural rights philosophy and the rights of individuals. So you see different people in here, and they have a sign that states something about a stereotype about who they are. Okay, so you have one person up there that says, "I am not white trash." One person says, "I am not a color." I will not cut your grass. I can actually see you. Muslims are not all terrorists. So all of these things are kind of stereotypes that we put on people, but that idea of human equality, that even though we may have stereotypes and prejudices here in America, you should have the equal opportunity at success, and every human being should be treated as equal. That does not mean, and our founding fathers did not mean, that everybody is equal in talents and capability and energy. But what they did believe is that everybody should have the equal opportunity to have that social mobility that we talked about. That you could be Ben Franklin and the son of a poor printer and rise to be one of the most influential founding fathers. That you could be Alexander Hamilton and actually be born in Jamaica as the son of a slave and property owner and rise to be one of the most influential founding fathers as well. So this is, something that our founding fathers thought was very important, human equality. So let's quickly compare classical republicanism versus the natural rights theory. So basically, the main gist of classical republicanism, remember, is to promote the common good, achieve human excellence through civic virtue, do what's best, not necessarily for you, but what's best for the community as a whole, okay? That's the concept of civic virtue in classical republicanism. Giving up what may be best for you so that you can make sure everybody has a better life. Natural rights is going to argue we want to ensure our own protection of life, liberty, and property. Even Thomas Hobbes would agree, with the life part especially, that we need to protect individuals' life, liberty, and property, our freedoms, our property, okay? Secondly, classical republicanism, putting community interests ahead of the individual interests. You got to think back to Roman republicanism and talk about, like-minded, homogeneous societies where people form together because they have similar interests, and therefore they can have a representative government because everybody has fairly similar interests. On natural rights philosophy, they're going to argue people have self-interest. They're going to pursue opportunities that best fit them. And this is kind of more of what we see in modern-day America, maybe a little bit more greedy aspect of it, that look out for yourself because nobody else is looking out for you. Next, we have the public sphere is most important. Therefore, we need to limit individual privacy. We have a belief that expression and opportunities to consider thoughts or ideas incompatible with the common good. Whereas natural rights would argue the public sphere is a collection of private individuals and interests. There's no limit on acquisitions. The government must be limited and the public sphere as small as possible because the public sphere is only there because private individuals make it up. Classical republicanism also says all citizens should participate fully in the community to promote the common good. Civic virtue about holding office and doing what's best for the community, whether that be farming or accounting or baking, whatever your role was in society, you're expected to do it and participate fully for the common good. Whereas a natural rights philosopher would argue, deciding whether to participate in the community or government is up to the individual. If you want to run for political office, go for it. If you don't, that's fine as well. Okay? And that is the end of this lecture. All right, on to Unit 1, Lesson 3 next.